Welcome back to the Franklin Factor podcast. I am so excited today because we have a special guest, my dad, Jimmy Franklin, the founder of the Franklin team. Welcome, Dad.
Good to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited for us to be able to talk about his early years in real estate and how Jimmy Franklin, the sole realtor, came into being the Jimmy Franklin team, and then Andrew and I taking over in that journey to that point and where we are now 40 plus years ago. So
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So Dad, tell me kind of what happened in your, like, how did you find real estate and go about getting your real estate license?
Years and years of research of what my best journey would be, what my best path would be, my career path. That's not true. The actual truth is I was a slacker, college dropout, getting the kind of jobs that college dropouts get in my 20s. And I'd gotten laid off like on the day your mom and I were closing on a home. And
closing on your first home, right?
Yeah, on my birthday, 27th birthday. I didn't come to that conclusion that moment, of course, but somewhere in the next month or so, I not getting jobs.
Well, I just thought about this, but I don't know if I've ever asked you this, but did you have such a fabulous experience with your realtor to help you find that new house that you just thought you wanted to be a realtor?
We walked into a builder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we walked into a
with
builder.
no representation?
I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what a realtor was. Anyway, about a month into it, I go, I'm going to try this, Nothing else has worked.
Might as well. What do you have to lose?
I'm going to try this. And so that's how I got my license. I went to school. I was working at some part-time job to pay the bills, pay the electricity bills. And I went to real estate school. They didn't have online real estate school in 1982. By the way, that was the year. So you drove to a place.
How long did it take? It doesn't take
not too long. I mean,
okay.
like all in, all my classes were done in a month. I had enough college that they gave me credit for the.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. They changed that pretty soon after I got mine. Yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah, I got enough college. I didn't drop out of all my classes. And so, I don't know, it took about a month in that. And then, you got to wait a couple of weeks and then you take the class or you take the test and it takes a little while to get back to you. So it was late October when I got my license.
Okay. And then, so you tell us about, obviously you hear about in the last 10 years, or maybe this has always been the case, but for us more so, I feel like choosing a brokerage was kind of a deal. What was your kind of experience with choosing a broker?
One thing that happens is you tend to choose a broker that's convenient to your house. And so there was maybe 5 or 6 real estate offices to choose from. And I did take a class. During the real estate class I was taking, I was told you should be sort of diligent on asking those questions. So I did do that homework. I got into real estate as a whim, but I did actually do some research, and the one that was doing the most business was the local Century 21 office. I think there was 6 offices and 3 of them were Century 21.
Oh, wow. They didn't have because what was it, the map or the key map protected area? Or maybe it was the key map protected area. But.
I think they had something where they were just selling franchises, without a lot of regard for the owners,
So even 40 plus years ago, when you're getting in the business, some of your, it'd be kind of interesting to hear that. I'm sure the listeners would be interested to hear your questions to the brokerage then was production, how many agents and how productive they are, right? Isn't that what you said?
Yeah. And the broker that I ended up choosing, Century Western, Bob Corey, he was really good at answering the questions and dealing with that and how much more business they were doing than any of the other offices. And all those offices eventually went out of business. None of them existed 10 years later, I don't think. And they're still around. So they had he did a good job of recruiting agents and there was some good productive agents. Liz Carter, for example, was kind of a legend she was there, and so she controlled her neighborhood. She farmed, and that was what you did in those days.
Yeah, and he kept some productive agents, I guess. Yeah.
The models sort of changed, and more, the REMaxes came in, and then Keller Williams and all that, and so there was some disruption during that. Maybe several years later, I left in '86 to go to REMax, for example. So that was a model that just made more sense for realtors because we got to keep more of our money.
Yeah, that was your main reason for people started talking more about the splits or wasn't a straight fee.
Back then, when I got in the business, I didn't know any better. I think that was sort of what it was. The broker got about half of what, like in our case, I got 47% of every commission I made, and that went without a cap. So, and I'm not talking about being on a team. That's a totally different thing. Nowadays they have teams, and teams provide value and they provide leads and things like that. That's fine. We had none of that. So we were just giving the broker, we were giving I think we gave the regional office 6%, and then we split the other 94%, 47 for me, 47 for the broker.
Wow.
And that went on. And so that's how I ended up at REMax 3 years later. You didn't ask me these questions about that, but I'm probably jumping ahead.
That's
but
good.
That's how I ended up going to a place that had a had a ceiling on what you had to pay, which was incredibly appealing because by that time I was doing good business. I was doing good production in relative to the time, relative to that era. I mean, obviously the years went by and people blow those numbers away because they have so much more, you can do so much more business now with all the technology that we didn't have.
So with REMax, what was the splits back then? Like it was, not the split, the caps. Like there was a ceiling you had to pay, right?
Well, you just paid them a monthly fee.
That's right. Yeah, like a desk fee or whatever,
Pretty
office
much,
fee.
pretty much.
And
the concept was you pay you pay your overhead, give them a small profit center, and and I like that concept because nobody was talking about it. There was no real help coming from the brokerage in the first place. So this idea that the brokerage deserved more than one brokerage deserved more than another was just silly to me in 1986. Mm-hmm. It's way silly now because there's so many better concepts. But back then it was kind of like, this just makes more sense, So yeah, they were the ones to get that rolling.
Yeah, they were the disruptor then. And so since we're on the topic of brokerages, so that was 86?
When I went to REMax.
To REMax, and then had a very long, why don't we talk about how long you were at REMax for and kind of the journey there?
Well, I was at REMax, if you really think about it, until you guys bought the team from me. Which would have been in 14. Mm-hmm. So 14 minus 86 is 28 years. And then you guys stayed at REMax till 2018. Right. So
32
I had my
years.
I had my license with REMax for 32 years before we left.
Yeah, and talk about that. So like us being at REMax for 32 years, whereas there were a lot of people at that time that were at REMax for a long time, right? Yeah. Ronnie Matthews, David Flory, all these people that kind of, there wasn't that disruption kind of type thing. People went, they stayed at a brokerage. There wasn't a disruptive model. They just kind of looked down, did the work, and continued doing that until you have some new models come in and disrupt it. I guess we can kind of talk about us kind of coming to you when Andrew had that opportunity about EXP and hearing about the opportunity. I think we were looking at it as, okay, we want to make a change. We think we're paying REMax too much money. Mm-hmm. Let's start looking at it. And we, we're thinking about going independent. We talked to Keller Williams. And then, we started kind of down the avenue of EXP. So once we kind of, I guess, eliminated the KW and the independent, and we kind of brought it to you, what were your thoughts on us making that move?
the best idea ever. I mean, it was so crazy how much better it was. And the funny thing is, I got why it worked. Like, how much money it, because I used to own a REMax franchise. So
yeah,
I know
we
how
forgot
much
about adding that.
how much money gets sucked out of these brick and mortars. And if you think about it, there's a brick and mortar there, there's a brick and mortar down the road. There's a brick and mortar as the crow flies a mile away from the office that we had. And think about all that, and then all this fat. REMax of Texas had that was a thing. So this particular model could support agents so much more and give us an opportunity to have ancillary income and wealth building opportunities that, in fairness to the other offices, the franchise system that came in, it just wasn't possible because you can't undo that franchise system. It's there. It's going to be there till it's not. And
there has to be the cost until they...
Yeah, the cost. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. You can't not pay your rent.
Yeah.
You can't not pay your copy machine.
Right.
And the person that's in there manning the office.
So we're going to talk more. There'll be other episodes on our podcast where we kind of break down the different benefits of EXP and what we have found beneficial over the last several years. But so we don't really want to get into that now. But
no, we're here to talk about me.
I know. Yes. So to go back to like your early days in real estate, what were some of your like initial goals? Like what were you planning to do? How many,
Mm-hmm. So initially, my goal was to survive. Like I didn't know anything. There wasn't any training to speak of. I just sort of had to wing it. And my goal was to pay my electricity bill.
And your mortgage, your new mortgage.
My new mortgage. Well, on the home I didn't have representation on. Yeah, that was my goal. Now, I figured out pretty quick that I was, I was pretty good at it. And this was probably going to be my career. I didn't know how successful I would be, but I thought I could make a living. You came along about a year, a little over a year later. And so that was my goal, was to just take care of that. But as I got into it, and I realized, that I was successful in relative to that era. The 80s was another time to talk about some other time. But I figured out that I was going to make it. Then I started getting goals, and I started to, because success breeds success, and the more success you have, the more, ambitious you get. And so at that point, I was like, okay, and I listened, I paid attention to other people, and so I started to do that. I wrote down my goals. And
I remember you had the list with all the goals, and it was on the bulletin board with the little tack on it, and you had actually, I remember like you crossing it out when you've like hit the goal.
Yeah.
There'd be health goals. I mean, tell us a little bit about like how you kind of thought to do that and how long you kept it up, because I feel like you still do pretty well about that.
I stayed with it my entire production career, and I don't really remember. I think probably someone, probably went to some kind of a class, some kind of training where somebody goes, hey, write down your goals. Okay, I'll do that. I didn't know why that would work, but it did. So I did, and I wrote it down, and I revisited them, and then it became something I looked forward to doing. And every year near the end of the year, I would get excited about the next year, and I'd write down the goals. And so it's funny because I didn't do that after you guys took over. Like, I just didn't do it anymore. And then just this year, I started to do it again, because I'm coming up on 70 in July, and I decided I wanted to focus on some stuff. And so it's kind of cool.
And you taught us to do that. Andrew and I do it every year separately. Obviously, we've got like business goals. We've got like our personal family goals. And then we've got like, health or whatever we want to focus on. But we do it every year now too, since we've been doing in business essentially. So, and it's not just about doing them, right? Like yours is out there. I don't have a bulletin board, but I have mine to where it's accessible. I did have a few years where I wasn't ever looking back at it, and that's not the point of it, to just write them down one time and never look at it again.
And you need to, sometimes that goal isn't going to happen, and you can adjust it. Or sometimes that goal you make it too easily. It's like, I didn't set the goal high enough.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. Okay. So on the flip side of that, what are some of the challenges that you had to deal with early on that you can remember?
Man, I tell you what, told you this, you're probably sick of hearing it, but you joined me a short time out of college, in 2007. And so in 2008 came along, you were in the business. We all, that's a famous period of time in our country's history. But it was nothing compared to 1980s. I mean, it was nothing. I'm talking about in Houston.
Yeah.
I'm sure in other parts of the country, it was a lot worse in 2008. And in the 80s weren't all that bad. But in the 80s here, 50% of the homes during that decade were foreclosed on. So it wasn't like a couple of years like the financial crisis, which in Houston really I don't think was ever that bad. I had a better year in 2009 than I had in 2008, better year in 2008 than I had in 2007. So there was business to be had.
Right.
In the 80s, it was tough. It was very tough.
That's when
the saving grace for me was I was broke during coming into this business. I had nothing to speak of, no assets. So it wasn't like I was, I was living high.
And then
it dropped off. No, I'd never had any money in the first place. So it didn't seem all that bad to me. I was just, the way it is.
So tell us, how many homes did you sell your first year and your first full year in real estate?
In 83, I sold 12 homes.
12 homes.
Yeah.
And I think the average is about 5 to 6 homes a year, I believe. So that's double in your first year.
Yeah, especially now that we're, we're interested in bringing people to our model. We have our BA research it, and it comes into. I don't think it's 5 to 6. I think it's more like 4. In fairness, that takes a lot of zeros into the average.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
there's a lot of zeros out there,
yeah.
But I think that's kind of the average. So I was doing. Now again, the price point, the average price point was less than $100,000, and then then you give. So I might have a really good commission. It was $100,000 home, $3,000 commission, and I got to keep $1,450.
I mean, it's weird to think about now, but also the cost of living.
There is inflation. Yeah, there's inflation,
right.
But it was that particular number was not was low in adjustment for commit. I mean, it's much lower than
for sure.
what the average sales price is now.
So those are your early years. Let's kind of talk about we want to give some perspective on, building the foundation of this becoming a real career and how that kind of started. So tell us about when you felt like you were starting to get some good momentum, and this was, you had mentioned earlier about having the feeling that this was going to be a career for you. What about becoming a successful career for you?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, the 80s were difficult, and I did say that I could figure out I could do it. But there were probably some times in there where, I struggled enough, and it was frustrating enough, and it was tough enough where if there had been a good job that I was qualified for, which there was not, by the way, I might have considered it, right? As much as I like being in real estate, I still had to make a living.
Sure.
And so the 80s were really tough. And I remember coming into 1990, I was, set my goals. I kind of looked at stuff, and I remember where I was when I saw this. I figured it out. I was kind of excited about having some stuff, investments. I did my net worth, and it was zero. I had a zero net worth. I had the same amount of assets as I did debt. And I remember thinking, I think you were 7, and Andrew was 5. It's like, man, I really thought things were going to be different. And it's funny.
It's better than just being negative.
Yeah, I guess
negative.
That's one
Trying
way
to look at it.
That's one way to look at it. I didn't quite see it that way at that moment. But it was funny. It was like right in that range. Like the first year that I hit, REMax had their little designations, where you got a little plaque or something, and
Yes.
they had the 100% Club, which was hard to get then. There was guys like Ronnie who was already into the better numbers, the platinums and stuff like that. But mostly there wasn't. And I remember making it in 1990. And then by just 3 years later, 2 or 3 years later, I was making the platinum and then all the rest of them. And then I think in about 96 was the first year. I think it may have been the first year they even had it, but the Houston Business Journal, I got in there, and of course we've been in there every year since. But I got in there, I got honored. And I remember thinking, wow, there's I don't know how many realtors there were at the time, 30,000 or whatever, in the top 25. And at that point, I realized, okay, by that time, I was no longer like every commission wasn't a bill. I finally was getting, where I realized, okay, I'm not going to have to sweat out this business anymore. So it was a long time of sweating. So if I could give any advice to agents that are starting the business is, man, be patient, be diligent, be patient, and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and you just need to. I've seen people get out of the business at the drop of a hat, and some people should be out of the business, and they have no business being in the business in the first place. But there are people I've seen that, man, this person probably has some pretty good potential. They could probably make this work.
I think this would be interesting for people who are being, they're doing well. They stayed in the industry and they're really doing some good business. When did you feel like, was there a pivotal moment, or when did you really feel like, okay, I'm spread too thin, I need help, and I need an assistant, or I need agents to come join? Like, was there any pivotal moments that you can recall?
Yeah, this is a little embarrassing for me, but you guys are so much more proactive than I am as a leader, as a owner of several businesses, multiple businesses, right? You guys are. And I was just very reactive. Like, it almost had to, okay, I got no life because I've got so much business, I got no life. I need some help. It was kind of like that. I wasn't very, there was a couple of times later on down the line where, I got into business development people as I got into the builder world and all that. And, and some of those ideas were actually original ideas that I felt like I thought of. At least I didn't know about anyone else doing it. That was something I was starting to be more proactive at. But for the most part, in those early years, I was doing a lot of business. Very few people even had assistants at that point. There was some people that were starting to come up with teams at that time. Again, I mentioned my buddy Ronnie Matthews a lot. He had teams. He had a team before almost anyone did. So, but I was like, I've been broke so long. The idea of let me take all the business myself because I can't take a chance, that I can afford to do this. So it came later. That came later. But first there was assistance, and then later on, again, and a lot of times even the agents that came onto the team, they asked to be on the team. I didn't go and find them.
You never had outbound.
I didn't go find them. They just said, "Can I be on the team?" And I said, "Okay." It was no. I'm not the best person on that particular thing. There's a lot of things I do well in this business. That just wasn't what was.
So it's interesting you say that, because early on, obviously you didn't know what you didn't know, right? So you didn't really know that, like, okay, I think now's the time to have an assistant or whatever. So it took you time to figure that out, but it seemed like you picked up how to delegate pretty well. At least
I'm a master delegator.
When I came to work for you, I'm just, man, once you got an assistant, it was like, what can you not do?
This is the greatest thing ever. I don't have to do that anymore.
And I think that's a very common thing that I hear with agents, like good producers, that they want somebody, but they know they need somebody, like opposite of your thing, but but then opposite of that. So I guess it's one or the other, but cannot delegate. They just can't let go of stuff.
Yeah, no, I can do that really well. Now, the byproduct of that is I got pretty helpless on knowing how to do anything. Like I couldn't, there was a point in time where I couldn't go in MLS. And I was one of the top producers in the United States, and I couldn't go in MLS. I had to have because once I started delegating, I lost my ability to keep up with anything.
Yeah.
Now I'd take that trade all day long, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I would still trade off that, that helplessness that I'd take that all day long over having to do this stuff, because that freed up my time, and time is a big deal.
It's huge because obviously there's much more money making, higher dollar things that you can be doing that. There's people that are really good at assisting other people. And so why not, have them come, and they could probably do this stuff better. Like, I can't imagine you writing a description on a listing.
Well, I can do that. I can do it.
I'm pretty sure you had me look over your listing description on the house you just sold.
I was pretty creative.
Okay, so tell us a little bit, because this has become a huge part of our business, is our builder division, I guess, that really was our only huge division for a long time. So tell us about how you kind of got into working with builders and your relationships.
Well, if I'm being objective and honest, I think there was some luck involved with that. I met some people who were in that world, and through different ways, just happened that way, maybe, but they were on the way up, at these companies. That was fortunate.
What you mean by way up is you mean in the management.
In management promotion. But I will say that what I did with those relationships, the meeting was fortunate, but what I did with them was not luck. That was, I deserve some credit on that, because I was able to build trust in many cases. In some cases, I was exclusively referred in a lot of those situations.
Well, and I think it wasn't just trust. I think you have the ability to like think outside the box, which kind of led to the inception of like our buyout program. Talk a little bit about kind of how that started, which really is thinking outside the box.
Yeah. If I'm, again, giving credit where credit's due, someone else had the plan, but they weren't in the city. And a guy who came to Houston to run Pulte, J.R. Barnes, one of the great guys of the business, he passed away about 10 years ago, and we became friends immediately. He had brought this program from Dallas, and they had done it in Dallas, Pulte, and he asked me if I wanted to do it, because by that time I did have some trust. So I'm sorry to negate you're giving me all this outside the box credit. No, I am good. I am good outside the box.
Now, and you are good, but the idea came from that. What we did with it was much different, because obviously that program is still not around. It was I guess maybe the foundation of it, but what we did, and well, I say we because later on, but what you did and kind of how you were able to do it, you had to be a creative thinker to.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I'm joking around about myself on that. I do have some of that outside the box thinking. In fact, before that buyout, I did some outside the box programs with builders.
Yeah.
In the 90s, so that kind of got me where I could even have the trust and all that.
And they would take your call and have the relationship, right?
Yeah. So, it's true that, but we did that. But anyway, that program started that way. And then, after I realized it was a great program, and what it did, quite frankly, is it eliminated competition. I mean, there's so many good people in this business that can sell homes. Hey, it's a good refer to this guy. They can sell a home. Hey, refer to this guy. I can sell a home. This was something that very few people could do. Well, if your home doesn't sell, we have a guaranteed contract on it. So and we had to take some losses. we have to do that, but the being willing to do that is what gets us, what got us the business. And so that really started in about 2000. And it's a program that you guys have, existed when you took over the team, and it exists today, 25 years
and
later.
Expanded, yes, over the years. And even so, we had a lot of competition, copy.
Well,
so.
I think the one thing that set me apart from a couple other programs was that it was a real. It wasn't a bait and switch. There's going to be a contract. It's going to happen. We're not going to tell you later on that we can't do it. If we go in and look at it and can't do it, we'll tell you right then, and then tell the salesperson that this isn't a candidate, or they're not accepting this as a fallback.
Right.
But I think that's what the ability and the fact that we were willing to accept what could happen if we didn't sell the home is what set us apart from some of the programs that wanted to do it, but really they didn't want to do it.
We were able to still continue to do what we do, even with years where we had incredibly high losses and not really an ideal situation. But like we like to say, it's like an insurance program, right? So
that's the analogy I came up with early on. To someone who would say, why should I do this? Well, there is a percentage of the value that you're guaranteeing. It's like, well, if I'm probably going to get it sold. But it's nice, but it's a free policy. It's a free insurance policy. You'll have this in case it doesn't.
Okay, so as your journey, I don't want to say is coming to an end because that sounds kind of morbid. As your real estate production journey is kind of slowing down and we are starting to come in and take over the company, I think is really when a new part of your career has blossomed, and it's your kind of focus on mentorship. Not saying that you have a mentorship program and all of this, but you've always been somebody that lots of agents always looked up to over the years, but more so you've kind of taken this on as you love the power of our brokerage and what it can do, and you take it personally on really trying to help people. So let's talk about that a little bit.
I think if you go back to the beginning, and I'm sorry, talked about that, how I was kind of a slacker, a loser, and then I got successful, and when I got successful, I never really got over people asking me my thoughts, because it's like, wow, nobody was asking my thoughts before I got, into this. So I always enjoyed it. And I never worried about, oh my gosh, is this guy going to take my business or not? I actually have heard people say that. And I never could quite understand that, hide your squirrel hiding its nuts, are you serious? I mean, just help people. So I always liked doing it. But there really wasn't a whole bunch of that when I was coming up through the business. And it wasn't until, we got to this brokerage where, we were incentivized financially by people doing well, So it just became a natural, something I like doing already anyway for free. Now is, now pays me. So if people do well and they stay with us. So yeah, I like to, I invite calls.
Yeah. So to talk about, obviously, yes, our brokerage does have that financial incentive. And I think you've always been good at giving advice and mentoring agents, on our team. I've seen that. And of course, Andrew and I think, come to you with advice sometimes. Any thoughts on that?
You do come to me from advice sometimes, and you almost never listen to it.
I don't know about that.
You come to the advice, you thank me for my advice, and then you go do exactly something else.
That may or may not be true sometimes, but we do like to give some accolades to you for some of the big advice that we have listened to, Matt and I, over the years on our own financial stuff. So here we go.
All right.
But that's a good thing, right? Or that's a good point, I should say, is how is it when you have agents or, even just personally, friends coming to you with asking for advice and then them not taking it? It's
funny. That's been, if you ask me, what's the main recipe for success. It's like, go find somebody that's more successful than you are, that's been there, that has the experience, and then ask them for advice. And if they're willing to give it to you, take that advice. And so often, agents get the advice and then go, I don't want to do that. That's not cool. That's not fun. That's hard. That's too much work.
Too much work, yeah.
And, that's not a magic pill that will fix my problem right now. I've seen the look in people's eyes sometimes when I tell them, and it's like, oh man, that's not what I wanted to hear.
They wanted to hear the easy way to success.
Some magical way. And, and so, like there's one of our guys in our group, we didn't bring him in to the brokerage. When I was still kind of on my way up, I put a phone call into Ronnie Matthews, and he took my call. So he was one of the few people of that era that was that didn't look at this as a threat. Like, sure, I'll help you. Mm-hmm. And he was great. And he never rushed me off the phone, no matter how busy he was. And so when I tried to take that lead, when I got successful.
What was it?
2014.
2014 is the year that you got married and decided you were ready to sell us the business. So Andrew and I take over. What were your initial thoughts and or concerns about us taking over your company that you spent so long building?
It was a little bit of my sort of attitude about a lot of things, which was I'm not a big worrier. And I knew you guys, known you all my life, all your life, not all my life. I've known you all your lives. And I felt comfortable that you were going to do well. One of my buddies that I roomed with in college, he finished college, by the way, and he became an attorney. And he was like, "Man, you need to you need more protection when you have to take this thing back from these guys." It was a joke, but it's like, well, it's too late now. We're doing it. So so I felt very confident that you would do well. Now, what I didn't see happening was that you took this really good, business that I had and I had grown, and that you essentially bought from me, and you blew me out of the water. You blew me away. You lapped me about 4 times. So yes, maybe you were born on between second and third base. I don't know. Who can say? But what you did with it was what you guys did with it has been beyond unbelievable. So that's been my my biggest pride in this business at all is what you guys have done.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. So wrapping up, looking over the last 40 plus years in the industry, what are some vital or key components that you would want to share with the listeners?
Well, the main one is relationships. If you want to know how I got successful, that's it. That's what it was. I don't think I outworked. There was plenty of people that outworked me. Plenty of people smarter than me, better planners. Never missed any events that you guys did. That wasn't going to happen. I like my downtime, but I was pretty good at that, and that's everything, right? I mean, and so we didn't invent a better iPhone or anything like that. What we really have is our service. So most everybody can do this. All right. So the key is that someone needs to know who you are, number one, and then it would be better if they liked you too. That's going to help too.
If you're a good person.
If they like you or trust you or something.
Yeah.
They're going to have some reason they're going to do business with you.
Right.
Because everybody knows 12 realtors, And so so that's sort of the if I'm going to have one thing that I could point to for my success, it would be that, that I was good at doing that and sticking with staying with the relationship and not looking at the relationship as a mark, as an opportunity, as a you know, as a sale. Like, I'm not going to be different from someone who's not a client at this point than somebody is. That works out well because there's been situations where like there was no agenda, and then it just somehow came into and became business.
Oh yeah. I mean, like how many of those that you've had that have been like, I mean, we'd have to really look back where, you know, when you were early on and how many transactions that they've done just because they liked you and they wanted to do business with you and or us later on down the road, you know?
Oh yeah.
So
I can't even I can't quantify it. It's impossible. And that's one of the great things about our business is that, you know, the potential of our business is that you should always do more business this year than you did last year because you know more people, you know more people this year than you did last year. So, and I know there's when it's like, well, wait a minute, what about the bad year? You know, the market goes down.
right.
Yeah, I suppose, but it really hasn't worked out that way too much here. You know, maybe once or twice over the 40 years where there was a drop off, but for the most part, you should always do more. And then that kind of goes exponential if you think about, you know, the old 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Because so at first you come into business, you don't know anybody, you know, or you know a couple of people, and then the next year you know a few more people, but then that has a chance of getting into a domino kind of a situation. So now I don't even know how many people you have in the database, and all that started with, you know, that started back with nobody, right? But it's grown that much. So for the most part, you guys are probably always going to do more business one year to the next. With very few exceptions.
Yeah, right. If you keep doing it and treating people right, which has to do with being, you know, good relationships and
right.
Yes. Well, thanks so much for listening. Hopefully, Dad, I appreciate you being here. Hopefully you'll come back another time and we can chat some more about some of this other stuff that we talked about.
I'm not like going to be here every week. You don't want me
You don't
here.
want to be a co-host? Well,
it was a lot of fun.
Definitely like, share, and subscribe. See you soon.